You're a PhD navigating the academic job market. There are so many variables that can impact whether you land the tenure track position you've been working towards. There's your research, journal articles, teaching, and more. Trying to balance those responsibilities with your life outside of work can be so difficult. It can all become a bewildering haze of stress and anxiety. What should you do? Where should you focus your time and your energy? And how can you make sense of all the advice on the best way to navigate the process in an effective way without compromising your physical or mental health? Hey there, it's Mark Bayer, and you are tuned to When Science Speaks. In this episode, we're going to explore exactly how to get your first academic job and climb the academic career ladder with an internationally recognized expert who spent the last decade and a half building his own successful academic career, going from PhD graduate to full professor in less than 15 years, and by the time he reached 40 years old. Dr. Emmanuel Tsekleves is an established professor at Lancaster University and research director in Lancashire, England, where a key part of his research director role is mentoring early and mid-career researchers in grant writing, publishing high-quality research, and securing tenure-track positions. Let's dig in. Welcome, Emmanuel. It's fantastic to have you here.
Hello, Mark. It's my pleasure to be here, and thank you so much for the invitation. I look forward to our discussion.
Same here. And I'd like to start by asking you about your own academic journey. Can you share your career path with us?
Sure. I've basically started my academic career, I would say, when I started my PhD, as most people do. It was a very challenging time because I actually decided, for whatever reason, to do PhD in a very different area from what I did my first degree. So I did my first degree in linguistics and languages. I had the master's that bridged linguistics with computing, but then I decided to do a PhD in computer engineering and design. So this meant that I had to learn very quickly what others would learn through a full course. And throughout my journey, like most PhD students, I, of course, struggled with all the different duties and the new things about research and how to conduct it. And I probably made all the mistakes that are there to be made. Looking back at the first papers I've written, how badly they were written, and so on. But I was fortunate to learn very quickly from my mistakes, not repeating them. And throughout my journey, I had some amazing mentors that really guided me through the process. So, as you mentioned at the intro, I managed to climb fairly quickly the academic ladder by reading through this. So, what I do now is post online, mainly on social media, some of the lessons I learned to, I would say, a younger version of myself and those out there who are in the same shoes.
Which is wonderful. Obviously, hindsight's 2020. Things become much clearer in retrospect. And you and I actually talked offline a little bit about this. And the familiar quote, I usually attribute it to Warren Buffett. I'm sure there are others who've said things like this, but it's good to learn from your mistakes. It's better to learn from someone else's. And in your current work, you help your mentees and your clients avoid common mistakes as they move through their academic career. What are some of the big pitfalls that you talk about, and how can listeners in academia avoid them?
Sure. Probably I will go with an anecdote from my own experience. I remember with one of my mentors when I was applying for my first lectureship, when I was about to finish my PhD. He actually applied exactly that quote, and he brought an example of a common acquaintance we had who applied previously for a lectureship as a postdoc, and they didn't get it because at the interview, one of the mistakes they made, and I see a lot of postdocs applying for assistant professorships too, is they talk in terms of the research they're going to conduct and adopt still the mindset of a postdoc instead of talking about the funding that will be attracting as an assistant professorship and talking about the funding landscape. So this is an example of mistake of those who are transitioning from a non-tenure position like a postdoc to a tenure track one, like an assistant professors. They do talk about the research they're going to do rather than actually the funding they're going to attract that will enable them to develop a team that will conduct the research and they will manage the research.
You can totally see how that can happen because, as you pointed out, you use the word mindset. You're coming from this mindset, and now you're, of course, going to be going into a different environment. as a lecturer, perhaps. Maybe you're in the same game, but you're in a different seat and you have to have a different perspective. I really love that example because it's not obvious. I also want to point this out because you talked a bit about the resources that you offer. And in addition to your work at Lancaster University, you also offer a range of resources for helping PhDs and postdocs and lecturers secure tenure track jobs. You've got a really popular newsletter, for example, called Academic Insider. How can listeners learn more about the resources that you provide in that part of your work life and the best way to connect with you to explore your training offerings?
Sure, absolutely. The best way I would say is following me on social media, mainly LinkedIn, and then Twitter, X, and Instagram, as I share daily tips, advice, and resources. This is the best way also to connect with me and some of the services I provide to both individuals as well as universities is training material and programs that developed through my experience and through working with other mentees.
Excellent. And we will for sure have links to those resources, including your LinkedIn profile. We met through LinkedIn. You're really active there. You're posting exceptional resources that can really be helpful. A lot of folks are connecting with you, following you, and reviewing the resources and commenting on them as well. So I would encourage listeners to check Emmanuel's LinkedIn profile out as a kind of a gateway to all these great training offerings that he provides. Now, I guess maybe thinking about some of the insider tips that you're sharing does certainly a spectrum of a variety of different tips. Any that you can give as examples? The one you did just gave us about the pitfalls as far as the mindset, super helpful. Maybe thinking about other tips that you share with mentees and clients that you've found to be particularly effective or they've found to be particularly effective.
Sure. A classic one is a lot of PhD graduates, they tend to treat the application market like a game where the more applications they send, the more chances you have. And they tend to do several applications a week. And unfortunately, in the vast majority of cases, this ends up nowhere. It gets them more and more frustrated. And also, it's unprofessional because then when you want to apply to the same institutions, it doesn't look good. So one of the advice I give to my mentees is focus on quality rather than quantity. What hiring commuting members we do is actually with a bit of experience, we can spot from miles those ones who are using blanket type of application that they send to multiple institutions. And of course, these are not shortlisted for an interview. The key is really to focus at one application at a time. And you are a researcher, so you should be doing a very thorough research about the research lab if you're applying for a postdoc or the research project. If you're applying for assistant professorship, the department, the research projects they have, the faculty, the type of courses they're doing, the type of activities they're engaging with, and ensure that you incorporate those within your cover letter, research statement, and teaching statement. So those who are reviewing this, they can see this person actually did the research, and also they can immediately see how you fit with their culture and with the programs they offer and their research. Another piece of advice is don't talk about you, talk about them. The whole point of an application, and this applies both for academia and the industry, is about how you fit with that specific role. So the key question is, what is the value you bring into the institution? The vast majority of applicants, I would say about 80%, which by the way is those ones that don't get shortlisted, all they do is talk about themselves. They talk about what they want to get from this job. They talk about their skills and experiences, but they fail to link those with a specific role. Now, imagine an applicant actually starts by talking about the specific value they would be adding in terms of the teaching program, in terms of the research groups that exist, in terms of the projects, in terms of the engagement activities the university is doing. And then they use their own experience as a way of demonstrating that they can achieve that. Now, these are the applicants that they stand out. Unfortunately, they are the minority, and that's what I'm trying to change with my posts and mentoring sessions.
100%. And it's so interesting because, first of all, this idea of research, and I say this to audiences and my students, I talk about making sure you research, then reach out. And I say, the good news is you're researchers and you do this all the time. I'm just going to orient you in a way that directs you to research the most relevant, most important things to your stakeholders. So, absolutely doing that upfront, and you're really marketing the specificity of getting that information from the research. Okay, what are the exact courses and the faculty research interests and all of those sorts of things so readily known or discoverable, much easier than back in the day. So just zeroing in on that first. Yeah, I love that mindset and actually the mechanics of doing it as well. I wonder also if you could share with us, maybe for listeners thinking, oh, Manuel's giving us lots of great information, and they know where to go to get more information from your resources, for example. Is there one thing that a listener interested in landing a tenure track job could do today to improve their chances?
Yes, a lot. Another aspect which is very important is to engage with the boss holder. So when you look at a job advert before applying, before actually even writing the application, um, if you look at all of them, they will have at the end the name of an academic person who is responsible for that job. Make sure you engage with them, send a very short, very purposeful email asking for permission to either email them or have a brief chat, and then use that as an opportunity to demonstrate your genuine interest, but also get some insights. Now, why is that important? Three main reasons. The first one is visibility. There's a difference. People will be reviewing your applications at the end of the day, they're human beings. And there's a difference between reviewing someone's applications versus to someone they've already engaged with, either via email or via an online communication, video communication. It brings a face and a human aspect to it. The second one, you demonstrate you're not just one of these 80% that just doing a blanket application to every institution and job is out there. You're taking the time to ask a question and you basically want to find out more about it before you apply. So you demonstrate both confidence, but also that you are selective. And the third point is actually you can gain some insights about the role or about the institution that they're not available through the website. So again, these are some bonuses that you can add in your application material.
Absolutely. So important, that kind of engagement. And as you say, it really does separate you out. It just so accomplishes several things at once. Of course, you learn so much more than you would if the person on the other side of that email address is willing to engage with you and they are learning about you and you're differentiating yourself so well. I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule, the work that you're doing in your university position, the value that you're adding also separately and in a related way through your trainings and through these free resources through the newsletter, for example. It's been wonderful to talk to you, Emmanuel, and I know listeners are going to get a lot of value out of this conversation.
It's been my pleasure, Mark, as well. And I look forward to further engaging with your listeners.
Same here. Listeners, in my work with PhDs and postdocs and faculty members over the years, I've seen how challenging it can be sometimes for them to translate complex topics into engaging, memorable, and still accurate, of course, descriptions of real world value of their work so they can get funding, they can get buy in for their ideas and promoted faster. If getting proven powerful strategies for effectively communicating your work would help you in your academic journey, you can get a free infographic that I created that's become a popular tool for scientists. Just go to complexitymadeclear.com to get your free infographic on 11 keys to translating complexity. That's complexitymadeclear.com to get your own copy of this popular resource. Dr. Emmanuel Tsekleves, thank you again for such a wonderful discussion. I know that listeners who engage, who follow you on LinkedIn and your other social platforms are going to get really educated and informed in ways that are non-obvious, that really are insider ways of doing this. As you mentioned, you sit on these review panels and you get all this incoming. And I always like to know the answer to the test before I go in for the test. And hearing from you as someone who's reviewing all these applications is really priceless. So thanks again for being on the show.
My pleasure, and that's exactly my aim is to lift up the hood and show what goes underneath.
Wonderful, wonderful. Listeners, thanks for being here on this episode of When Science Speaks. And I hope you'll be back next time for the next episode of When Science Speaks.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to click subscribe. Check us out on the web at whensciencespeaks.com, and we'll see you next time.